What's up guys, it's Paul with Empire Barbell, and today I want to go over some specialty bars, specifically how they pertain to a movement like a good morning. So a lot of you guys have access to specialty bars and you might not necessarily know exactly what they're for or what situations would benefit the most from a particular bar. Sometimes, just like everything else, a little variation is good for the sake of it, but it's good to know how you can manipulate the bar you're using to get a specific desired training effect. Now, a good morning is a great example because a good morning is a pain in the ass by itself, and it used to be you only had a straight bar to do it with. So if I'm doing a good morning, which for those of you that don't know, think of a Romanian deadlift, just the bars on your shoulders. So imagine I have a straight bar on my shoulders, I'm set, I'm braced, my knees are slightly bent, and I'm positioning my hips back, and I push my hips through. So that's a good morning. There's a ton of variations you could do, having your feet wider, not going down quite as low. Sometimes I'll do them to pins, I'll rest on the pins and then pop back up from a dead stop. Sometimes I'll do them without the pins and I'll pause at the bottom. There's a ton of variations, and it tends to be a pretty good accessory, a pretty good analog for deadlifting. Okay, any type of heavy hip extension is going to benefit from a good morning. Now, with a good morning specifically, where the difficulty comes is from where the load is positioned. If I'm doing a Romanian deadlift, the load is in my hands, which means the mass of the object that I'm moving is close to my body the entire time, and I can actually push it back towards my hips as I come down. With a good morning, the weight is stuck on your shoulders, which means if my shoulders go forward, the weight is forward. And that severely hinders your ability to maintain position. It makes it a much more brutal upper back developer, because to keep your torso from bowing like a fishing pole, the musculature of your midsection and upper back has to pull double time to keep you straight. So it is a great upper back developer, great midsection developer, and it can also be utilized to grow the muscles of the main movers, the hamstrings and the hips, the glutes. So if you're being very strict and getting through very steep range where you're getting a lot of stretch through your backside, that's going to be a little better indicated for growing your hamstrings, growing your glutes, because you're probably going to be using less weight, which means it's not going to be such a burden on your upper back. And sometimes, if you look at how a lot of the West Side guys train, or a lot of guys that live and die by good mornings as their main developer, they tend to limit the range and go way heavier. So you'll see guys real wide, getting bowed forward just a bit and coming back up into something like a power good morning, which is still going to develop the musculature of the glutes and hamstrings. Load is going to be much higher, and also your upper back just has to explode if it's going to be able to handle that type of stress. Now, straight bars are a pain in the ass, again, because the weight is fixed. So we have specialty bars as a way of getting around this. Cambered bar specifically is one of my favorite tools for a good morning. Now, when you think of a cambered bar, you might look at the cambered bar's ability to swing and think it's just about stability, being unstable. And it's actually not so much. It's more so about where the weight is centered and your ability to pull the bar back and keep the weight where you want it. So if you think about like a trap bar deadlift versus a straight bar, if a straight bar is in front of you when you deadlift, that's much harder than if you can have the weight back in line with your hips. Good morning with a cambered bar, actually any movement with a cambered bar is exactly the same. So the cambered bar, by keeping your hands on and pulling back, you can actually pitch down and scoop your hips into the weight as you pull the weight back into you. So it changes the strength curve a bit, it changes your sense of the movement and the role of your hips as being a scooper, as something that pushes forward into the weight as you bring the weight into you. So unique developmental tool, but also it helps cue really aggressive hip action when you're coming through on the lockout of a deadlift. So to demonstrate, I'm getting it set, getting my stance, I'm still braced, okay, glutes are tight, knees slightly bent, ribs are down, and I'm gonna start hinging. But as I'm hinging, I'm pulling that weight back towards me, back, and then I'm scooping my hips into the bar. And when you do that, your sensation of it is gonna be that it feels differently. The thing I notice primarily is that it puts the load into my hips, okay? It's not quite as hard on the upper back. I can go probably 100 pounds heavier on this than with, let's say, a straight bar before I really start to feel my upper back. Whereas if I do this for reps, especially with control, and I really work the stretch as I'm pulling that bar back in me, I feel that it's my glutes and hamstrings that are being loaded. So I look at this as a better cue for scooping your hips in aggressively on a deadlift and as a better developer specifically for the muscles that extend the hip, the glutes, the hamstrings. It's a really good tool, and it's great for going heavier. So I'm a big fan of Cambered bar good mornings. So if we have your hips and your head, and the Cambered bar lets you keep the weight back, then a regular bar is glued to your shoulders. A safety bar extends the weight forward beyond your shoulders. So we're looking at different positions on a spectrum. So if you notice this bend right here, the safety bar is not just about being comfortable because you have this pad, although that's a benefit. This curve right here, as you push the handles up, notice the weight moves forward. So that's one of the things that makes a regular safety bar squat a little more challenging for a lot of you guys, is that it shifts the weight in front, which demands more of your upper back, which is no different in a good morning. So now we're pitching forward and the weight is further out in front, so leverage is worse. It's like we just turned our back into a longer fishing pole. It's going to bow more easily. It requires more force to keep it from bowing. So that's where your upper back really has to come in and do its job. So a safety bar good morning, I'm always going to feel, I always feel it in my mid back. I always feel it in the muscles that keep me tight. I get ab cramps. I have to brace so hard to stay tight and not collapse under that load, which is where the value of this movement is. I have a hard time pushing this one hard enough to actually get anything in my hamstrings and glutes. That might not be the same for all of you guys, but I have a hard time loading it up because the limiting factor is always my upper back collapsing. And I tend to include these as standalone exercises, and I rotate them based on what I feel like I'm due for. For me, more of it is about variety for the sake of it than it is about isolating weaknesses. I definitely have had weaknesses I've had to attack in the back in the past, but most of what I do is about getting a sustainable rotation of movements, and if I progress linear on them over time, I'm always better after each block. So it's not so much about fixing one particular weakness at once. You want to be a well-rounded lifter, and that's going to keep you injury-free and progressing for a long time. So the safety bar. So notice where the bar is relative to where it would be if it was on my shoulders. Not only is the bar going to be further back, but it's actually going to be a little bit lower if it's on my shoulders. So as I come back and I'm braced and I'm pushing my hips back, I feel that weight coming up onto my neck, and I have to aggressively push the handles up to keep the pad lower on my traps. But the sensation is that the weight is still in front of me. Ultimately, that is where the difficulty is, and that is where the growth and development comes from. So that's a quick breakdown of how I handle the good morning, specifically with different bars, the Cambered bar and safety bar. I don't recommend doing them in the same block because they're very taxing independently of each other. If your hip power needs to step up a little bit and you have access to a Cambered bar, it's not a bad idea to get a touch on it. But remember, it does not replace your practice on the main movement, okay? These are secondary and tertiary exercises. So any questions, leave them in the comment box or go ahead and start a thread on the forum, empire-forum.com. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Brahman Empire Barbell. I'll see you.